Hello everyone, it's Half-Life Mike. I hope you're all doing well. Today we are back with Lord of the Rings Total War Remastered, and we're doing a faction guide and overview for Dale, which is the city-state of men in the northeast of the map. I'm sure we'll all remember Dale from the Hobbit trilogy. It's featured quite prominently there when Smaug goes to destroy Lake Town. Dale isn't really featured that much in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but as far as I'm aware, it was rebuilt to some extent by that time. So if you look at your starting regions, then you'll see we've got Dale and Lake Town, which are both overlooked by Erebor. It is quite a challenging campaign just because you're a bit of an underdog faction. If you were to compare them to a faction in the base game, they would be more akin to a barbarian faction. They don't have the access to the top tier of buildings like the more civilized factions do. If you go to the building tree here, for example, you can see maxes out at tier 3. But I do enjoy playing them just because it's something a bit different, and it is a challenge as well. They actually do have really good archer units, as you would expect. They are descendants of Bard the Bowman, so that is the strength you want to take advantage of when playing as Dale. So having said all of that, I'm now going to look at generals and unique characters. Then I'll move on to the economy and finally recruitment, campaign strategy, and a full run through of the units. I'll start with the unique characters and generals. If you look at your family tree, you'll see your faction leader is Brand, who is the grandson of Bard the Bowman that features in the Hobbit films. He has a son aptly named Bard II, and he in turn has a son called Bane. So Brand starts in Dale, and if we pull him out, we'll be able to see the unique model that he has. But as with all the models in this mod, they all look fantastic. Brand is the only general that has a unique model. The rest of your generals and all the ones that spawn in after the start of the campaign will have this model here that Bane and Bard II have. It looks very similar, or it looks like the Honor Guard, which is the unit that makes up the General's Bodyguard. It's got the white cape on the back as well. But excellent looking models. In terms of the units, every general is made up of the Honor Guard, even the ones that spawn in after the start of the campaign. The stats on these ones are a bit inflated because of the experience, but essentially it's just a very tanky sword unit. It's got excellent defense combined with the +2 hit points, which makes them quite tanky, and then has reasonable melee attack as well. Asdale doesn't have units that are that strong, or melee infantry units that are that strong. You do need to somewhat rely on your generals to provide that power. So that is something you can do in the sort of mid to late game, is get armies stacked up with general units, and that should allow you to progress fairly efficiently through the map. Now, having covered that, I'm now going to move on to the economy. In this section, I'm going to run through how the economy works. So as we discussed before, you are restricted in terms of getting to those higher tier of buildings. You can only build up to tier 3 in any settlement, and that means you're soft capped at tier 3 of the economy buildings as well. You will notice that there are tier 4 buildings for the trade and farms, but it's only possible to get them if you capture a settlement that is already a large city or a huge city, and then you can build those buildings in that settlement. If you own a settlement that is a minor city or below, you will never be able to upgrade it yourself to a large or huge city, so you are restricted to tier 3 of the trader and farms in those regions specifically. So just as a bit of context, your income comes from farms, taxes, and trade. It is quite good that they'll do get access to the farms, because there are some factions that don't. So even though you can only get up to tier 3, that will still give you a good farming income. In order to build the farms, you need that settlement or region to have hidden resource farm. Luckily, a lot of the regions in the starting area, like Dale, Lake Town, Grassguard, Lonsdale, and Feldsguard, all have hidden resource farm. So you'll be able to make a decent farming income in most of these regions. Moving on to the trader, the conditions attached to this building are that it can only be built in a settlement that has hidden resource, men, elves, dwarves, or glass. So, like with the farms, most of these regions, these rebel regions, have hidden resource men. Some of the regions in the north here have hidden resource dwarves, and then some in the Mirkwood area have hidden resource elves. So that's not really a restricted building. You'll be able to build the trader in most regions that you conquer. Then you have the roads. So Dale are restricted to only the first tier of the roads. I think Gondor has access to 2 tiers, but Dale only gets access to one, which means they don't get the trade income bonus that the second tier has, or the increased movement range. You just get the 25% movement bonus. But I mean, tier 1 of the roads is still better than nothing, so it's still useful. In order to be able to build the roads in a settlement, that settlement has to have hidden resource roads. So not every region will have that, like the ones in the forests don't, and then some of the ones where there's mountain ranges, they don't have hidden resource roads either. But I would just build them where you can, because it makes getting armies to the front line much quicker. In terms of other trade buildings, so there are mines, and they'll actually get access to the mines building tree, but in order to get those, you need to take a settlement that's in the mountains. So, for example, this settlement here in Hald Kudan will have, you'll be able to build mines in the settlement, and actually Dale can get access to 3 tiers of the mine. So that's definitely a strategy to pursue if there's difficulties with the economy, but generally I've found the rebel regions in this area, you can get enough income off of them where you don't need to prioritize going for mines or go out of your way to capture settlements where you can build mines. So, but it's just something to note if you want to go after them. The last economy building that some factions have access to is the port. Dale can't build ports, unlike some other factions, but there's nowhere close where you would be able to build ports anyway. There is the Ruined Sea, but none of the regions around here, you're not able to build ports in any of the regions around here for any faction. So the closest place you'd be able to get a port, if a faction could build one, would be the coastline, and you would already have won the campaign by that point anyway, so it's not really that relevant. But I think that covers everything for the economy. So we've covered all the economy buildings. In terms of the economic strategy, I usually do just try and build up these regions in terms of the farms and the traders. Dale is quite lucky in that a lot of the regions around here start with, hidden resource farm and men, so you can really get a good economy going before you have to start fighting the likes of the Eastlings or Mordor. But yeah, in general, even though there are restrictions, I'd say the economy is fine as Dale. So having covered that, I'm going to move on to recruitment. So having discussed how the economy works, I'm now going to move on to recruitment. So like with all factions, you have your standard barracks and forge building lines. The barracks giving you access to your early to mid-game troops, and the forge giving you access to your late-game troops. The Dale faction also has a third building, which is the stables, but you can only build those in regions that have the horse resource, and you can see those on the map. So for example, Falsgard has the horses resource here, so I can build stables there, and then there's also the lesser horses resource, which means you can get access to some of the horse units but not all in Lonsdale. But I'll discuss the barracks first. So tier 1 gives you access to the spearmen and militia of Dale, then tier 2 gives you access to the Dalian bowmen. To be able to build a barracks, that region needs to have hidden resource men, and most regions in this area, or most regions that are inhabited by men at the start of the game, have hidden resource men. So most of the regions in this area, the Easterlings, because they're men, the men of Farad also because they are men, Gondor, Rohan, all these regions generally have hidden resource men. You can also build the barracks in places that has hidden resource, just resource glass, which is basically just the Hobbit village, but you can see those on the map. And I just took Hobbiton for the purpose of this video. It's going to come in at a later point. You don't start with either of these two settlements. But that's the conditions attached to the barracks. You need to have hidden resource men, and that will give you access to the troops that we went through before. but none of the troops you can get from the barracks are really that strong. You need to rely on the daily and bowmen in the early game because you don't get access to your bardy and archers until much later, and the militia of Dell is additionally not that strong, but in the early game you will need to rely on them because it's really all that you have. So next I'm going to move on to the forge. So there are 3 tiers of the forge, as you can see here, and to get the Great Forge, for example, you need the Muster Field, and to get the Royal Forge you need the Hall of Warriors. So you can't just go straight for the forge, you need to get the barracks first. But in terms of the units you can get from the forge, tier 1 gives you access to the Axemen of Dale, which is actually quite a decent unit in the early game. Tier 2 gives you access to the Swords Guards and the Dalian Capital, and tier 3 gives you access to your most advanced units, the Bardian Archers and the Dragon Knights. So in order to build the forge, the first 2 tiers of the forge need you to have hidden resource men in that region, which we discussed before, and then to build tier 3, you need that region to have hidden resource Dale. So you won't be able to build tier 3 in many regions. There's not that many settlements on the map that have hidden resource Dale. I did go through the game files and count them up, and there actually are a few in this area. So I'll just read them. So we've got Dale, Dorwinian, Lake Town, North Rovanian, which is Aror, Rovanost, which is here, Dun Ederic, Calduin East, then Redwater, Valagsgard, Grassguard, Northwatch, which is up here, Kalpelborg, which I can't find. I definitely found it before. There it is. Then near Thelaborg, which is here, and Cardivan. So most of the regions in this area have hidden resource Dale, and that will allow you to build tier 3 of the forge. So that's the restrictions on, all the regions I read out there have hidden resource Dale, and they will allow you to get tier 3 of the forge. So that's the restrictions on the building line itself. In addition to that, there are restrictions attached to being able to actually recruit the units from the forge. So tier 2, as we mentioned, will give you access to the Sword Guards of Dale, but in order to get the Sword Guards, that region does need to have hidden resource Dale. So if you have a region that doesn't have hidden resource Dale, you'll only be able to build to tier 2 of the forge, and it will only give you access to the Axemen of Dale. And just to show that, I've got a region here which is called Carrick, which I just captured for the purposes of this video, but we'll see here that tier 2 of the forge only gives access to the Axemen of Dale because we don't have hidden resource Dale, and then you can't build tier 3 either. So that's the restrictions on the forge in terms of the building line and the units that you can get from it. But yeah, I do think you want to try and get the Royal Forge where you can, because the Bardian archers are some of the best archers in the game, outside of the Elven archers, and then the Dragon Knights have armor piercing, so they help against factions that have a lot of armor, like the Easterlings. So definitely want to try and rush that in at least one of your settlements. Okay, so that covers the forge and the barracks. Now I'm just going to cover the stables. Okay, so yeah, sorry about that. Just needed to capture this to be able to show what I'm trying to show for the video. So we can see on the map that this region has the horses resource. So that opens up another building line, which is the stables. And that allows you to get your Dalian Outriders and your Knights of Dale. If a region only has the lesser horses resource and not the horses resource, like in Lonsdale, then you'll get access to tier 2 of the stables, which we can't build here because we don't have lesser horses, and that will only give you access to the Dalian Outriders. But it's just something to note because there's not that many regions in the mod that have horses or lesser horses. Felixgard and Wansdale are the closest, and then if you go east to the Easterling settlement, Baltroth, they have lesser horses, so you can get the Dalian Outriders there. But I think in the regions where you can build stables, it's definitely good to try and rush that because you do need to rely somewhat on cavalry, given that the melee infantry is not that strong. So the Knights of Dale that you can get, they're decent cavalry, nothing special, but it's the best you have, and they will give you a bit more power, given that you don't have that much from the melee infantry. So that's the stables, barracks, and the forge. The last thing I want to cover, which is related to the forge, is that there are some region-specific units that you can get from other areas of the map. So if you go to a region like Bjorn, which has hidden resource Notdale and Rohan, you'll find that the barracks will give you access to some additional units like the Town's Guard, Peasant Militia, and the Peasant Bowmen, but none of them are really that strong. Like, you wouldn't go out of your way to get them, I don't think, but it's just something to note that in certain areas of the map you can get different units. That's the same for the Bree settlement. So if you have a settlement as hidden resource Bree, then from the barracks you can recruit the Bree Militia, which is here. Again, they're nothing special, but I think for the sake of completeness I did include them. This is another region actually that only has the lesser horses resource, so this is what I was trying to demonstrate before. If you have a region that just has lesser horses, you can get tier 2 of the stables, and that gives you your Dalian Outriders. If you conquer a region that has hidden resource, I think it's glass. Yeah, so as I was saying before, glass is basically the Hobbit village. So if you have that in your region, then you can get the Hobbit archers and the Hobbit militia, but again, they're not very powerful units. Okay, so after that, there is supposed to be a unit that you can get from settlements that have hidden resource Rohan, but I did try this out and it didn't seem to work, so I'm not going to go over them, and I think it wouldn't be worth going for anyway because the Rohan units you would get are not that powerful. It's really the units you can get from hidden resource Dale that you'll need to rely on during most of your campaign. So I think that's about it for how recruitment works. It's probably worth mentioning as well that, like with most factions, you do have the buildings that give you upgrades to armor and the like. The practice fields, rangers, master blacksmiths, and the training grounds. And that is quite important as Dale because your units are not that powerful. So what I usually do is I use the swords guards at Dale because even though they're not the highest tier of infantry, the Dragon Knights are, these are the best units you have defensively. They've got defense of 22 and melee attack of 4. The Dragon Knights are powerful units because they have armor penetration and melee attack of 6, but they have quite low defense, so they're not really, I don't think they're really suited to holding the line. I usually use the Swords Guards of Dale, and then just make sure to get the armor upgrades, so to increase that defense, and that's what I use as the kind of backbone for my armies going through most of the campaign. And then I use Lake Town or Dale to recruit the Bardian Archers, which are excellent archer units. They have missile attack of 17, which is on par with some of the Elven Archer units. So I just hold the line with the Swords Guards and then use the Bardian Archers to get most of the kills. But obviously you can only get the Bardian Archers in regions where you have hidden resource Dale. So that's probably about it for recruitment as Dale. Now I'm going to move on to the campaign strategy. So now we've run through the economy and recruitment, I'm going to move on to campaign strategy, where I'll just look to provide some tips that I found from my own playthroughs. So the first port of call is the victory objectives. We need to take 20 settlements, including Dale, Lake Town, Dorwinion, Rivenost, and Arrow. We obviously start with Dale and Lake Town, so that's not a problem, but Dorwinion, Arrow, and Rivenost are these regions here. So something I have noticed is that if you don't take rebel regions quickly, then the AI can get there first. So what I generally would do at the start of the campaign is that you start with quite a few big armies. You've got a decent garrison at Lake Town, decent garrison in Dale, and you also start with a stack just outside of Dun Ederic. So what I would do is move most of those forces down, take regions on the way, and try and take Rivenost, Arrow, and Dorwinion fairly quickly. After you've got those, you've got your specific victory objectives, and all you need to do is get to 20 regions overall. So in terms of the regions in this area, you can actually get quite a lot of regions just by fighting the rebels. At a certain point, the Eastlings will close in from the east, and you will need to deal with them. They have units which have quite a lot of armor, so if you can get Dragon Knights before that point from tier 3 of the Forge, then they can be useful against the Eastlings, but sometimes the Eastlings come a bit too quickly, so you will need to deal with them. But generally, they're not too powerful. I'd say the units probably are stronger than yours, but in general, they don't bring up huge forces to this area. So as long as you outnumber them, that should be fine. There's something else to note is that their settlement, if you can expand east, their settlement of Balchoth has lesser horses. So this is quite a good region to pick up because it gives you access to the stables and those Dalian Outriders. And actually the Easterlings share the same stables as you do. So if they've built stables in this region, you'll be able to use their stables to recruit your units, which is actually fairly uncommon in this mod. Most factions have their own unique buildings, but it just means that this region is valuable to take. After you've pushed back against the Easterlings, the next faction you might need to deal with is Mordor. So if Gondor don't get a handle on Mordor and Rohan don't expand east, then there's every possibility that Mordor just starts expanding north, and that's generally what happens in my campaigns, is that they start expanding up in this direction. And if you let Mordor become big, they basically become an unstoppable force, and they're pretty difficult to deal with. One thing I have noticed is that the dwarves of the Iron Hills will sometimes expand west. So the best possible scenario is that the dwarves take Askal and Thorenberg, because then you've got a buffer to Mordor. If they don't take Thorenberg and they take Askal, that means Mordor can come up through this region. And if you are dealing with Mordor, what I would recommend is, so as I was saying in the recruitment strategy, I usually use the Sword Guards of Dale as the backbone of my infantry lines because they have the highest defense out of any of the units you can recruit. And then I use the Bardian archers from the Royal Forge to deal most of the damage. And it's also worth mentioning that because the Dale units are not really that strong, you also want to get your upgrade buildings to be able to increase the attack and defense of those swords guards to give them a bit more staying power in the battle. But if you've got full armies of swords guards and Bardian archers that are upgraded, then that should give you the best possible chance against Mordor, because Mordor actually is a really powerful faction. If they have trolls in their army, then that can be quite difficult to deal with, so you definitely need archers for that. So that's your sort of general campaign direction and strategy. A few other tips that I noticed was Lonsdale and Fargsburg are the regions that have the horses resource. So if you want to get access to your cavalry, which you probably will need, then these are the regions to build up. Lonsdale is here and Flagsburg is here. Because Dell can only build up to tier 3 of any settlement, usually once I get above 6,000 population, I just turn the taxes way up, because increased population growth will just give you more squalor without being able to, without giving you the benefit of, higher levels of buildings. So once you get above 6,000 and you're a minor city, I'd usually just turn the taxes up to maximize your income and reduce the population growth, which would give you some squalor. Okay, so that is how to deal with Mordor and the Easterlings and your building lines. I do usually use these regions to build up the economy, and then because Dale and Lake Town are the only settlements which start with good population, I use these as my recruiting hubs. But if you are able to hold off Mordor here and then just expand south, then it can actually be quite a good tactic just to enter Mordor through the mountains here, because they usually send most of their forces around this area. So if you can come in through the back, then that can be quite an efficient way to deal with Mordor when you're playing as Dale. But having said that, you've probably already won the campaign by the time you get there anyway, because you only need to get 20 settlements to win. But yeah, I think that's probably it for campaign strategy as Dale. It's definitely a fun one. It's, you are an underdog faction. It's not an easy campaign when you start coming up against the beast that is Mordor. But using the upgrade buildings, then you can definitely, it's definitely a winnable campaign, even on the higher difficulties. But yeah, now I'm going to move on to the units themselves and do a full run through on the battlefield. In this section, we're going to do a full run through of the units on the battlefield. In terms of the roster overall, we've got some decent melee infantry, a really good elite tier arch unit, and then some limited cavalry options. This isn't going to cover every single unit that Dale can recruit, because as we discussed in the recruitment section, there are some region-specific units they share with other factions. Like you can get the Bree militia from Bree and the Hobbit units from Hobbiton. This run-through is going to cover the specific Dale units and the ones you are most likely to use in your campaigns. We're going to start with the Spearmen of Dale. You can get these from tier 1 of the barracks. They take 2 turns to recruit, cost 290 gold, and have a 140 upkeep cost per turn thereafter. They are quite weak as early game spear units go. The defense is definitely on the lower end. The melee attack is probably average for an early game spear unit. The morale is respectable, and the unit size of 160 is actually very good. That's the one redeeming feature of this unit, is the unit size. If you need a unit to hold the line in the early game, this will be able to do a job, just because the unit size is so large that the enemy won't be able to kill it that quickly, and then you can use your archers to get most of the kills. Then we have the Dale Militia, which also come from tier 1 of the barracks and take 2 turns to recruit. They cost 310 gold and have a 150 upkeep cost per turn thereafter. They are quite similar to the spear unit in that they're a cheap early game unit with fairly low stats. The defense of 15 and the melee attack of 3 is definitely on the lower end. The unit size of 160 though is very good, especially for a non-spear unit, so you can use them in the early game to make up the line, because it's going to take a while for the enemy to kill 160 men, and in that time you can use the archers to rack up the kills. Up next, we've got the Dalian Bowmen, which come from tier 2 of the barracks. These are your early game arch units. They take 2 turns to recruit, cost 440 gold, and have a 210 upkeep cost per turn thereafter. The stats are definitely on the low side. The missile attack for archers generally ranges from 10 to 20 on the better elven units. So starting at 12 isn't great, but it's probably on par for an early game unit. The missile range of 130 is definitely on the lower end as well. I think range goes from about 130 to 180 on the better Alvin units. And with the defense of 7 and melee attack of 2, they won't do much in melee combat either. They do have a good unit size of 100 and ammo of 20 per soldier. So the ammo will go quite a long way, but just bear in mind they're not going to do that much damage until you get to your elite arch units. Then we have the Axe Men of Dale. So this is the first unit that you can get from the Forge, and you can get this from tier 1 of the Forge, so you can get this very early. I think Dale does start with the tier 1 Forge. These are a melee infantry unit without a shield, which is why the defense looks slightly on the low side. They take 2 turns to recruit, cost 400 gold, and have 180 upkeep cost per turn thereafter. But as I was saying, the defense is quite low. The melee attack of 7 is very good though, and the charge of 5 isn't bad either. So in the early game, I would say they're a pretty decent unit, especially with the unit size of 140. If you can get these and upgrade them slightly, then they will be able to go quite far, even though I would probably try and upgrade to the Swords Guards as soon as you can. Then we have one of the best units on the roster, the Sword Guards of Dale. These come from tier 2 of the Forge, but you need Hidden Resource Dale in that region to be able to recruit them. They take 2 turns to recruit, cost 510 gold, and have a 250 upkeep cost per turn thereafter. In terms of their stats, this unit is probably the best unit I have in terms of defense of 22, which actually is not that high when you compare it to other factions, but it's the best you have. The melee attack of 4 is probably slightly below average, but again, as an all-round unit, this is the best that Dale has. I usually, when I play Dale, build the upgrade buildings just to try and boost the defense and attack on these units so that they can hold the line. Again, like with some of the other Dale units, the unit size is excellent at 140, and that does make a difference when you're fighting against Mordor and the like, because they have upwards of 200 to 240 men or orcs per unit, so the extra unit size is definitely appreciated here. Then we have the first elite tier unit, the famous Bardian Archers. They come from tier 3 of the Forge and take 3 turns to recruit. They have a 650 upfront cost and then 330 upkeep per turn thereafter. In terms of non-elven arch units, this is about as good as it gets. They're actually better than the Rangers of Ithilien. They have +1 missile attack at 17, and I think they have similar range at 160. With melee attack of 4, they actually can do a job in melee combat as well, although with the defense of 12, they won't last that long. But overall, it's a fantastic arch unit. They also have 25 ammo per soldier, which is about as high as it gets as well. So even though they have a reduced unit size of 80, they still have enough ammo to make up for that. But as an all-round arch unit, this is fantastic, and definitely the jewel in the roster, I would say. They usually use these to get most of the kills in the mid to late game. If you can hold the line with your Swords Guards, then you can just get the Bardian Archers to rack up most of the kills. Up next, we have one of the coolest looking units in the mod, the Dragon Knights of Dale. Like with the Bardian Archers, they also take 3 turns to recruit, and you can get them from tier 3 of the Forge if that region has Hidden Resource Dale. They cost 740 gold and then 370 per turn thereafter. I don't think they are supposed to make up the main front line because the defense of 17 is actually a bit on the low side, and that's partially because they don't have a shield. They are more of a specialised unit. They have good melee attack of 6, and then the armour piercing primary weapon. They're very similar to the winged swordsman of Gondor, actually. So the armour piercing means they only take into account half of the target's armour value. So what I would use them for is more flanking, or for battles where you know the opponent has units with a lot of armor, like against the Easterlings or some of the monsters of Mordor. But I'll generally use the sword guards to make up the front line, and then just use one or two of these in your armies to flank. They do also have the unit inspires nearby troops, so having one or two in your armies will always be beneficial. Just bear in mind the low unit size means they won't last as long as some of the other units, especially with the lower defense of 17. Up next, we have the only missile cavalry of the roster, the Dalian Outriders. You can get these from tier 1 of the stables. You need that region to have lesser horses to be able to build the tier 1 of the stables. So I do think that missile cav in general is pretty overpowered, but the stats on this unit are fairly low. The missile attack of 10 is about as low as it gets, and then the range of 110 is fairly low as well. The armor of 20 is actually decent for a missile cav unit, and the melee attack of 2 means it's not going to do much in melee combat or with charges or anything. But I would say that missile cav is probably a good addition to any roster. It just takes a while to recruit these because they take 3 turns to get them from the barracks, and then the low unit size means their armor doesn't really go that far. But if you can get a few units in there, they can always be useful. Up next, we have the Knights of Dale, which are the best cavalry units that Dale has access to. You can only get these from tier 2 of the stables, and to be able to build tier 2 of the stables, you need that region to have the horses resource, which not many regions have. I think it's just Felixgard that's close to Dale that has it. They cost 830 gold and then 410 upkeep per turn thereafter. So they are fairly costly and they take a while to recruit because they take 4 turns to recruit. But in terms of stats, they are pretty decent. The melee attack of 6 is probably around average. The defense of 19 is reasonable. The charge of 3 is standard on an elite cavalry unit, and then the morale of 26 is also very good. I should note that the unit size of 80 is actually very good for a cavalry unit. So I would just say these are an all-round great cavalry unit, and it's probably worth rushing the tier 2 stables in Felixgard to try and get access to these units, because there's not many places you can get them, and they will make a difference in the campaign, especially if you can get recruiting them early, because they do take 4 turns to recruit, so the earlier you can get them, the better. Lastly then, we have the Honor Guard, which is the generic General's Bodyguard unit for Dale. They are basically just a very tanky sword unit. They've got the high defense of 26 combined with the +2 hit points, so they're pretty tough. They don't go down without a fight, but that's pretty common for most of the General's Bodyguard units. The melee attack of 5 is probably on the lower end, but not terrible, and then the morale of 20 is also pretty decent. As General's Bodyguards go, they're probably slightly worse than what other factions have, but yeah, solid unit overall, decent unit size as well. That's going to be it for this one. I hope you enjoyed the faction overview and guide for Dale, and I will see you on the next one.